All right, everyone. You remember back in the late 2000s with like the Tunisian protests and things like that, when people used to use Facebook and some of these sites to organize protests against tyranny? You remember how these sites kind of, at the time, were even a little bit proud of that fact and sort of talked it up? Well, because of our website allowing communication to go around government censorship, they were able to stave off fanatic revolutionaries and stuff like that. It was funny because even like Zuckerberg at the time sort of sounded like maybe a left libertarian sort of figure, and these people like Tim Cook or Jobs before him, the people at Google, Sundar Pichai and so forth, have sort of taken up a line of like, well, we want to maintain encryption, and they're fighting against tyrannies is acceptable and stuff. Well, now Facebook is useless because what they've begun to do is in accordance with government orders, which is hysterical that a private company supposedly nonetheless has to conform to whatever Uncle Sam fucking tells it to do. Sort of goes, the pro-tech censorship angle of their private companies, they can do what they want, sort of goes out the window when they're taking commands from the government itself. Facebook has begun removing pages that are being used to organize get-togethers and civil disobedience aimed at the unconstitutional lockdown situation, not just in the U.S. but elsewhere. Here's what I would say. First and foremost, anyone attempting to use Facebook at this point to organize protests is sort of being laughable. I will say that because Facebook, like the average age of the user on Facebook is in the late 40s at this point. It's basically the boomer tech platform. It really is. Not the easiest way is certainly to reach out to the segment of the population most likely to actually get out and protest and not, by the way, get seriously ill doing so, which is the youth, the under 25 crowd. No, in order to, you'd have to make TikTok videos at this point. You probably wouldn't even be able to reach some of them on YouTube. To tell the truth, we're being left behind technologically. I know Fuentes is joking about the new Groyper War being on TikTok, and I find that funny. Clankton eventually is going to have to establish a colony there. It's going to be a fun time had by all, I'm sure, once I try to figure out that fucking app. But Facebook is fundamentally useless, but it's a shell of its former self. This just illustrates how Facebook has changed infinitely for the worst. And it's not just because Zuckerberg wants to sell people's personal data to the communist Chinese over and over in bundles and allow it to be compromised in the process. It's not just that. Facebook was essentially, and I can remember this, like I get on Facebook, and it's 2007. I remember there were so many anti-war rallies and stuff being organized there. It helped that the average age of the platform user was probably in their low 20s at the time, but now our parents all joined the platform. No offense again to people in their 50s and 60s and stuff, but when a platform becomes an extended family sort of event and your grandma's trying to add you on a social media platform, the younger generations don't really like that. The millennials didn't like that when we were the younger generation. Gen Z, I'm sure, doesn't like that. Now Generation Alpha is getting old enough to use these platforms too. They're practically born with a smartphone in their hand. They don't even need to purchase one. It's become like a part of their biology. They just come out with a smartphone already attached. And a tablet. And those wireless earbuds that everyone wears now that makes them look like they're schizophrenic and talking to themselves when they're taking a fucking phone call. By the way, that's the most annoying thing under the sun, I will say. I know I sound like a boomer, but Facebook was, useful for organizing protest activities. Now it's fucking useless. Twitter's okay. Like Twitter, as far as I know, isn't trying to directly disrupt these things. YouTube, kind of, sort of. It depends, I think, on the premise. Like if I were to say, well, we're going to have a get-together because, this is unconstitutional and we're going to protest outside the stance, I don't think that would be considered against YouTube TOS. But if you're like spouting off like tinfoil hat stuff, then it is. It's kind of a weird gray area. And then you've got alt-tech. Why aren't people using the alt-tech sites more for organizing these things? It makes more sense. You do organize this on Minds. It's basically the better version of Facebook anyway. I guarantee the average user on Minds isn't 49 years old. It isn't your mother. Your mother probably never used Minds. What about even using some mainline tech? Like again, you can organize things probably more easily on YouTube now than on Facebook anyway, as long as you have a separate messaging system. You can use any site that you want. These people need to get together and start doing what the millennials were good at back when Facebook was useful, which is utilizing tech for activistic purposes. Keeping in mind, of course, change.org petition or whatever doesn't really ultimately matter in the long run in the scheme of things. It has to lead to real-world change, real-world action in order to be meaningful. Nobody gives a fucking shit about Facebook anymore other than the U.S. government stomping all over Zuckerberg when he tries to make a one-world currency. Because they say, oh, we want to be the ones to do that. Very interesting times indeed that we live in. That's about all. Peace out.